Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening for tonight's presentation on aircraft detailing advice from the experts. And we have an expert with us here this evening, Mark Rubin from New England Aircraft Detailing. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, tonight's webinar is brought to you in part of SocialFlight. SocialFlight's the free web and mobile app dedicated to supporting general aviation, and you can visit SocialFlight at socialflight.com, and you can also download the SocialFlight mobile app for Android and Apple devices. It gives you free access to tens of thousands of aviation events and destinations, everything from fly-ins to pancake breakfast to seminars and webinars like this evening, and you even get a weekly email that gives you information about what's happening local to you. So a lot of good stuff there. We also have a lot of prizes. I know pilots like to win things, and there are some great things as part of our Fly to Win challenge on the app. So check that out. We currently have, I believe, a headset that's being given away by Lightspeed. So very, very good stuff out there. Before we get started, a few tips. First of all, recording of tonight's presentation will be available on socialflight.com. And it takes us about 24 hours to produce that, and then we'll send you a link by email. So anything that you see in tonight's presentation, you can actually get that through being able to see it on the webinar. In addition, we have a special bonus for everyone who's attending. Basically, the last slide of our presentation is a gift that is being given out with information about detailing directly from New England Aircraft Detailing and Mark Rubin. So be sure to check that out at the end, and it's a great bonus for everybody there. So without any more ado, we have Mark Rubin of New England Aircraft Detailing. And Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so let's kind of hop right into things, and I'll start by telling the story of why we actually have this evening. So I am usually a pretty die-hard do-it-yourselfer. I'm an A&P and IA. I do work on airplanes all the time, as well as my own, of course. And so it's not normally something that I would do, to go and get my aircraft detailed. But the truth is, I had let things go for quite some time, and the temperatures were dropping, and it had been a very long time since I had gone and put the effort in that I knew I should have to get not just all the bugs off, but really, really do a good job detailing the aircraft and getting the oxidation off and trying to really take care of it the way that I thought I should have. And so I decided to give myself a gift, and that gift was to have the aircraft detailed. And I was so impressed and so absolutely blown away by the process and the detail and everything involved in it that actually led to tonight's webinar and passing along some of that information. And so our goal here is not to sell detailing services. The goal here is to give people information. Mark is willing to come tonight and really give away kind of the secrets of what's involved, the tools, the supplies, the process, what's involved in that. And so you may or may not choose to do this through his service or to do it for yourself, but I think it's incredibly interesting, the things I learned through this process, to see an aircraft that was in pretty good shape to begin with get so transformed through this process. And so that's what brought us here tonight. You can put questions in through the Q&A feature of our webinar. We will do our best to answer those questions, both of us during the webinar and then at the end of the presentation as well, to get some of those questions answered. We know everybody has a different situation with their own aircraft, and everything from the fabric aircraft to polished aircraft. There's all sorts of things out there. So we'll try to cover as much as we can. But let's get started, Mark, with the real question, which is, when we talk about detailing, what exactly does that encompass?
Detailing is, besides cleaning your aircraft, it's removing all the contaminants, which could be bugs, grease, oxidation, wax that is around the rivets that's been there for years, or every time someone waxes and they wax over the rivets, if you take a close look, you'll see black stuff there, which is dirt, wax, grease, all mushed together. but it's removing all contaminants off the aircraft and then applying some sort of wax, polymer, or coating or ceramic to protect it from happening again.
Right. So, I like to think of it in the way I was approaching it is kind of getting yourself back to a baseline. I mean, I'm not sure which of your guys was working on the wheel wells, for example.
That was Mike.
So, for everybody in the audience, one of the things I was most impressed by, it must have been an hour per wheel well that was spent. And that's our aircraft, which is a Bonanza. So you've got the complexity of the retract there. But kind of going through this list, really, it's a lot more than washing and waxing, and it includes everything that everybody sees here, which is both exterior and interior, but really, really down to some fine detail. Any other comments, Mark?
Yeah, most people don't even look in their gear wells. They don't go down there when they clean the plane. They don't look inside there and see what's growing in there. And if you don't take care of it, it will deteriorate the paint and can cause rust and other issues.
And even if you've got fixed gear aircraft, of course, there's still a lot of time, I would imagine, that your team spends underneath the aircraft.
Yes. Underneath the aircraft, the belly is probably the dirtiest parts of an aircraft when we go out to do a detailing job. The landing gear, the belly is usually the worst part of the aircraft. And then the tops of the airplane, I mean, if they're outside and they're not taken care of, and that's where you find all the oxidation on the upper parts of the aircraft.
So let's jump to our next slide here. Just a quick brief about yourself before we get into the process.
Sure. So New England Aircraft Detailing, we're a mobile company. We have 3 vehicles that travel: Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, lower part of Vermont, New York. And we detail all sizes of aircraft, anything from a 152 all the way up to Gulfstreams. We do have some Gulfstream clients that we take care of, and some of them, every time they land the aircraft, we have to be there and to take care of that aircraft. Some of our clients want to be able to eat off the gear wheels, and that's literally what they've told us in the past, one of our clients. So
I'd like that idea that someone has a detailing crew every single time they land the plane, and they want to be able to eat off the gear wells. That certainly says something. So, Mark, can you review the process here for us?
Sure.
And so, for everybody who's on the call, this is basically the agenda of what we're going to go through this evening. We're going to talk about each of these steps.
Sure. So the process starts with we mask off and protect areas like the pitot, static tube, static areas, and we mask off the windows if we're going to be waxing. We then will remove all bugs. We'll remove if there's any oxidation, we would buff out the oxidation with either a random orbital or a polisher buffer. Those are 2 different types of polishers or buffers. We then polish the aircraft after we removed all the oxidation and cleaned the whole aircraft. Then we'll apply coating, depends what the customer would like, whether it's a wax, which typically lasts 3 to 6 months, a polymer, which lasts approximately a year, or a ceramic coating, which lasts up to 5 years. And after we finish that, we would remove the tape from the aircraft, wash the windows. Sometimes the windows have scratches, so we can buff out some scratches in the windows, depends how deep they are. And that will be the exterior. The exterior may also require the spinners to be polished, the ice boots to be cleaned off and repolished. The leading edges depends what they're made of. The Gulfstreams they're all Brightwork, so we would polish the Brightwork, and depending on how bad or oxidized the Brightwork is, that will let us know how aggressive to be with our Brightwork polish. If it's a larger aircraft, you may have polished inlets also, so we would do that as well. And that's the most part for the short version for the outside.
And so a quick clarification for everyone there, since we got a question in there. Brightwork is actually any of the polished surfaces or bare metal surfaces that tend to be polished there, right, Mark?
Correct. And you have to be careful. Some aircraft, like the Learjets, Falcons, and Hawkers, they have stainless steel inlets, so you can't use certain polishes on the stainless steel. So it really depends on what the surface is made of to decide what we'll end up using on that aircraft.
Right. So now we're going to go through each of these steps, and let's get to the meat of this here. Now, one of the things I think that was most interesting, and one of the hardest things I think for a lot of people to find out, are what are the products? What actually are being used by the professionals to do this?
Sure. So the bulk of the products you can get from a company called Real Clean or Granitize. For example, we use Dry Wash Pro in the exterior of the aircraft to wash down and to clean off, to do a dry wash. Most airports do not allow wet washes anymore unless they have an oil-water separator drain. And so we're mainly doing dry washes. And depending on what area of the aircraft we're washing, we use dry wash. If it's grease on the belly, SD20 degreaser is by far the best degreaser that we found out there. We use a ton of it. We love it. There's also, to remove the bugs, we do use a product from Real Clean Aviation, and it's called Debugger. To me, it's a concentrated solution, and it's the best way to remove bugs. You spray the product on, it actually just melts away the bug, basically. It's not harmful to the paint at all, but it does the job, and it does it efficiently. I mean, the last thing you want to do is sit there and scrub bugs to get off and start scratching the paint. So with the right product, you'll prolong the life of your paint. So that's what we use for the basic clean. Next on the list, Granitize products. They have aluminum polish. They also have cleaners as well. The California Custom, their purple metal polish is a great metal polish for spinners. Another product out there is Nuvite S, which is another great product which we use a lot of for polishing spinners and for the final step. The So Clear Technologies, they make the 3 levels there, the microcut. That's a compound for removing oxidation. Depending on how much oxidation is there, that will determine which one of the products we'll use, the 100, 200, 300. And it's all by seeing the aircraft to let us know which one it is. I mean, and one thing very important is there are a lot of buffers out there, and you have to be really careful with compounds. You can imagine this, that the buffer is a spinning wheel, and it spins fast, and you can literally burn your paint right off your aircraft if you don't know what you're doing. So the buffer, which buffer, what speed matters, what kind of pad you're using on it, whether it's foam or wool. Wool it lets you cut into the paint really well if you have oxidation, but if you don't know what you're doing, you could burn right through the paint as well. So it's you got to be really careful if you're going to polish your aircraft for the first time. My recommendation is, if you're thinking of polishing, either polish not your airplane, maybe go to a mechanic and ask if you can get a door or something, a part of an airplane, and practice on that first, because the last thing you want to do is burn the paint off your aircraft, because once you burn that off, you're not bringing it back. But if you know what you're doing,
we're going to talk about the tools next.
Yeah, and if you know what you're doing, you could take a 30-year-old airplane that's sitting out in the sun and never taken care of, and you could bring the paint back to life. But on the flip side, you could also, buff off the paint. Solo finishing compound, solo polishing compound. That's a great last step for an aircraft that has light oxidation. That is made by a company called Flight Shield. Sapphire V1 nanoceramic protective coating. That's made by Flight Shield also. To me, that's by far the best ceramic coating protectant you could put on an aircraft. They give you 5 years of protection. It protects you from scratching, UV, and also gives you a high gloss in your aircraft. So you don't need to wax it for 5 years. Now, it doesn't mean that you're never going to wash your plane for 5 years. You still got to take care of your plane and remove the bugs, remove the dirt, but that will protect your paint. It's like adding a very thin layer on your paint. The weight is nominal. A typical 172 will use maybe 2.5 bottles, so you're talking around 125 milliliters, which is really nothing. But it will protect your aircraft, and we put that on all sizes of aircraft, and it's a great protector, and it makes the aircraft look like it came off the assembly line, or even better. It gives a really nice shine to it. And then,
yeah, I can definitely speak to that, and we're going to show a little bit more about that because the Bonanza ended up getting done with that nano-ceramic coating.
And the last product on the list there is a Perone leather cleaner and conditioner. That's the main leather cleaner and conditioner that we use. I've tried a lot, and that's by far the best one out there.
And Mark, as we go through this, both with the products and then the process and the tools, et cetera, on this particular slide, anything different for fabric aircraft or composite aircraft?
So fabric aircraft, we use a lot of the same products, but you just have to be more careful. So for example, I wouldn't use aggressive products in a fabric aircraft. I would use, if I was to buff out some oxidation on the fabric, I would use a foam pad versus a wool pad or a cotton pad, and just work it slowly. We've done it before. As long as you take your time and use the right products and the right tools, you'll be okay.
Excellent. And what about composites?
Composite also. You just have, you have to, each aircraft is gonna, when I come up to an aircraft, I can assess what I'll be using on the aircraft. And when it comes to composite fabric, it really depends. I have to really see the aircraft, let you know what I'm using on it, but I'm gonna be more gentle on those aircraft than a regular aircraft.
Okay. And we're going to cover these again in some more details we get to each section. So let's talk next about the tools.
Sure. So we have professional polishers. You have random orbitals, and you have like a Hitachi buffer polisher. If you Google Hitachi polisher or buffer, that's more of an aggressive type of polisher. You don't use it unless you really have to. So we'll use that for heavy oxidation. And then if with heavy oxidation, we'd probably combine that with a 50-50 wool blend pad to remove oxidation. And from there, if you're working with heavy oxidation, you want to step down to a random orbital buffer, which is more gentle on the paint. So we step it down to there. Microfibers are important to use. New microfibers, for example, if you're cleaning your windows, my suggestion is if you're cleaning your window, use a new microfiber each time, because if you use a microfiber that you used on the aircraft and you picked up some dust or some contaminants, and now you're going to clean your windows, all you're going to do is take that contaminant and scratch into your windows, and over time you'll see those micro scratches, and those are not fun. We use painter's tape, blue painter's tape, to mask off areas. You can buy that in a hardware store. You can go online. find it there as well. Leather horsehair brush. If you have leather seats and they're dirty or oily and you can't get out the dirt, the leather horsehair brush will get into the grooves of the leather without harming the leather. So if you're using Perone cleaner, you would spray that on and then use the horsehair brush to actually get all the dirt out of the grooves in the leather. We use an air compressor with a blowgun tip to blow out areas that we can't reach, and areas that you want to get dirt out where you can't get to, and then you vacuum it up. We only use HEPA filter vacuums in the aircraft because the regular vacuum will push out the air that it's sucking in from whatever you're vacuuming up, and put that air back in the aircraft, which the cockpit's small enough, you don't want to put any contaminants back in there. We use detailing brushes to get into hard to reach areas as well, and to use when we clean the gear. We use electric toothbrush actually, that with some of the finishing compound or the solo compound to get all the gunk out from around the rivets. It's the easiest and fastest way to do it, and it's gentle to the paint. Bug sponges are a great item to have to use in conjunction with the bug spray. You spray on the bug spray, use a bug sponge to get that residue off in the bug. It doesn't harm the paint. It's a great product to use. And then after you use that, use a little dry wash, spray it down, and clean it right off. And then safety equipment. Depends on what you're doing. You may need to wear a mask, goggles. If you're under the plane and you're spraying SD20 degreaser, you're going to spray up to the belly while you're underneath it. It'll fall right down on your face. So my suggestion is to wear goggles so you don't get it in your eyes, and just to be safe out there, whatever you're doing.
Okay, so let's. We talked earlier. So the aircraft that you're going to see the pictures of here, and the process that we followed was SocialFlight's 1975 Beech A36, and it wasn't in bad shape. Had a little bit of oxidation on it, but it had been a long time since it had been kind of brought back to a baseline of fresh and clean, and that includes the wheel wells and underside bugs and bug splatter and some staining from bugs that didn't come all the way off, and quite a few things around there that really could have used it. And so that's what you're going to see as we kind of go through some of this. And so let's start with preparation, because maybe I should have occurred to me, but I was surprised by the amount of preparation that goes into it.
Yep. So definitely to prep the airplane, masking off the windows. This way we don't buff the windows or get any wax in the windows. Covering of the static ports, or anywhere we don't want water or chemical to get into. Covering up the pitot tube as well. And that's our prep time. It does take some time, but you need to do it. It's part of the process.
Yeah, and that included the lenses and for navigation, lights, all sorts of stuff.
Correct. So here we're getting into the process of cleaning the aircraft, and you can see is those are the gear wells. There was some staining on the inside the cowl that was probably there for a while. And, just a little time,
we had a. I'll fill people in on that. So we had, and it's in one of our videos, we had a fuel leak that was in the injection system as we were coming into AirVenture last year, and it left some blue staining in there that we hadn't been able to get off. I tried doing it quite a bit, but obviously it's a heck of a lot better to be able to have clean white paint and see if there's something new, and that it's not old staining from something we've already repaired in there. I'll also let and the team, Mark's team, somehow managed to completely get that stuff off that I thought had really soaked in, and I had even tried some compound in the past. So that was impressive that came off, and the wheel wells you see here were after they had worked on it for a while. They didn't look as good as this when they started.
Yeah, what happens with wheel wells, if you don't take care of them, the paint in there, when all the grease gets in there, it just eats away at the paint, and the paint starts cracking. So we see a lot of wheel wells with the paint just falling off of the wheel wells. And just to say something else regarding the chemicals and compounds that we use, using the right chemicals can really if you're using the right stuff, you can cut down time. So you tried hard to remove that stain in your cowl. And another good example is we were at I think it was Logan Airport, and there was a King Air there, and there was this major stain on someone's on their boots, on the de-ice boots, and we're at the airport, and they asked us, hey, actually the pilot came over to us and said, hey, can I show you something? He's like, I've been trying for 6 months to get the stain off this boot, and I can't get it off. I don't know what it is. And in a matter of a minute, we took care of it. It's, using the right chemicals, it just, does wonders. So, that's a big part of it, knowing what to use on what part of the plane, on what kind of stain it is, whether it's a leather stain, an ink stain, or even a stain from, the stain like you had. Using the right product, is key.
And obviously, anyone who has questions, feel free to ask them in the questions section. We'll try to integrate those into our answers, and some other ones we'll get to a little further on in the presentation. So this is an interesting one. I had stepped out for a while. When I came back, I saw like every rivet being gone over with an electric toothbrush. That blew me away, and I was amazed at looking at the difference. This is in this case, it's the horizontal stabilizer and elevator on the right side of the aircraft, and it isn't something I ever have done in the past, and I would not have thought that would make a big difference. But when I looked at the right elevator compared to the left elevator, all of a sudden it stuck out that it was dark around every rivet on the aircraft, compared to the new kind of the cleaned up surface, and I found that was pretty impressive, and they went over every rivet, and that is, even though I'm a do-it-yourselfer, I wasn't up for doing that.
Yeah, we once spent 20 man hours on a Moody. There were so many rivets, and they were all the black, had the black ring around the rivet, and it takes time, but once you clean it off, and if you, especially if you ceramic coat it, now you're protected. You're not going to have that because you're not going to wax over it, year after year after year. You won't have that black ring around the rivets. And most planes do have it. People just tend to, it becomes a norm for them. But definitely we take our time, and, we clean those off, and the electric toothbrushes makes things a little faster. Because imagine if they're there doing it by hand, you'll be there forever.
Yeah. So we have a few people that have asked questions. We got a few questions I'd like to cover for a minute now, more than one of them. Apparently, I am not the only one out there that has tried to deal with blue fuel stains. I know that, of course. And so, Mark, how did you get the blue stains out, and what do you recommend to people both on regular and fabric aircraft? Your questions. Fuel staining, that's a big one.
So we use on your aircraft, we use the SD20 degreaser. The trick is you can't just spray it on and wipe it right off. You want to spray it on, leave it on for 20 to 30 seconds, then wipe it off. And if need be, repeat it again. But that's
it must have been something there, because I mean, I had tried an awful lot of different stuff, but certainly it did come out. And so the SD20 degreaser you let, and that must have soaked in or done something to help make a difference on that.
The SD20 degreaser is a great, phenomenal product. And you can't imagine how people struggle on the bottom of their aircraft in the belly to clean off the grease, especially when they haven't done it for the longest time. You spray SD20 on there, leave it on there for 20 to 30 seconds, and it just wipes right off easily.
And that's even staining, or do you sometimes have to actually go and compound some of that out?
It depends. I mean, if it's there for a long time as a stain, you may have to compound it out as well. Every scenario is different. Yours we're lucky with. It probably wasn't there that long, and it didn't leave a stain behind, so we were able to get it out. But it depends on the aircraft.
And that's so getting back to the toothbrush here. First of all, is that a spinning or vibrating toothbrush he's using?
So that's the circular one on top where it spins. That's the one you want to use.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so they make two types, the spinning only or the spinning with the bottom portion. As long as you have the spinning part on top, the round spinning part, that's the best thing to use. You can pick them up in Target, any pharmacy basically, but you want the spinning one.
Excellent. And he's using that with the Solo?
Yep, with the Solo. And the Solo is like a finishing type of compound polish combined.
Okay. A few other questions here. We're going to address interior stuff when we get to that side of it, but I think we've covered most of that. Anything special having to do with exhaust stains?
So exhaust stains, we use a product called Soot Master. It's made by Real Clean Aviation. Yes, it's made by Real Clean Aviation. It's a phenomenal product. We use it on turbine soot exhaust on like the King Airs, the TBMs, the Meridians. It's a great product. It removes that turbine soot easily. Now, like we said before, if it's been going on for a while and there's a stain there, then we'd go ahead and buff it out. Aircraft that we take care of on a contract basis, if you're taking care of it regularly, you're fine. It's not going to leave stains. If you let it go for a while, 6 months, and don't take care of it, it's going to bake into the paint eventually.
Okay, so let's move to the next step. I think we'll answer some of these other questions as we move along. So once you get the cleaning done, that's basically just kind of removing stuff down, the contaminants that are right on the surface, and then you're left with oxidation, staining, whatever's there, and it's time to get to that next level. You can see a little bit on this picture in the upper left. It's not great, but it's a little bit of a picture that shows that it was, the part of the vertical stabilizer that was in the sun all the time and kind of just sitting there really lost some of its shine on there, and there were some parts that were a little bit stained from birds and things like that. And this is the process that they went through. And the other thing I want to point out here is the blue tape protection that went on the wing walk, and then also where the color changes. I found that particularly interesting, that you put tape on the areas of color change.
Yeah, because the reason is on the area color change is if you're gonna buff from the green to the white, when you're buffing, there is a minute amount of paint that's being removed, and then you don't want to buff that onto the white paint or the paint that's adjacent to it. So that's why we tape off the other area there, so we don't contaminate that area with anything on the other side.
So can you talk a little bit more about the process, Mark, that you go through? We see that I know you used different types of buffers, and depending on the area, the part of the aircraft, the guys did different things, and they used different chemicals at all different times.
Right. So what we do is we always we assess the area and see how much oxidation there is visually, and then we find ourselves a starting point. So if I were to say that there's 3 levels of compound, 1 is aggressive, 2 is not so aggressive, and 3 is really light, I'd always start with a lesser aggressive. I use my eye to figure out which one to use, and then if it's not aggressive enough, I'll bump it up a step. The thing is, if you're gonna use an aggressive compound, you have to downgrade to a less aggressive step by step. So you'll start out with an aggressive, let's say, and then you have to downgrade to a less aggressive, and then downgrade to the least aggressive and some polishing compound to get it to where you want it to be. Because if you don't downgrade, go back. The aggressive is going to clean the oxidation off, but it's not going to leave it with a nice shine. It's aggressive. You're taking some of that oxidation off and some of that paint off. You'll see some swirls there. As you downgrade, you're making it look better and better and shinier and shinier.
And you can actually see there in that lower left image how that shine is starting to come out, and that's just at the removal step of the process.
Correct.
Now we opted to do this ceramic coating, and I'll have Mark talk about that a little bit. But as a consumer to this, I did a fair amount of research in what is this stuff? I mean, it's obviously an expensive process. It's very and anything that says it's going to last for up to 5 years, it would be great if it works. And so I did a fair amount of online research. Of course, this came first. Ceramic coatings came into the automotive world for collectors, and really saw nothing but rave reviews. The challenge, of course, just being that it is something that needs to be done correctly, and those little 50 milliliter bottles are very, very expensive. And of course, as you can see here, Mark, if you can talk about the whole process of doing it. When we had the aircraft stripped down, you would have thought that they were painting the aircraft from the care that they did in the special products putting it on.
So the ceramic coating, the Sapphire V1, the one that we use, like I said before, it gives you UV protection. It does give you protection. It's a layer of ceramic on your paint. So, for example, if someone was to walk by your aircraft or slide by it and touch it with something sharp, I mean, depends how sharp it is, but you're going to scratch that surface before you hit the paint. And it also gives you a beautiful shiny finish. So to put it on is a lengthy process. You're actually applying the coating in 1 foot by 1 foot areas at a time. So basically, you have the bottle of sapphire, you have a pad with a cloth on it. So you're putting a few droplets on that cloth, and you're working in 1 foot by 1 foot sections of your aircraft. You're going to apply it, put it on with not going to be in circular motions, side to side, and then you'll wait till it gets a little hard, which takes around 15 seconds. And you take a clean microfiber and you buff it off with a clean microfiber. You then move to your next section, and you want to overlap the first section. The only way to do this correctly is if you have a good light on it. Otherwise, you're not going to see where you started, where you finished, which part you have to connect them together. So it's a slow, tedious process, but it's definitely worth the outcome.
Yeah, and so as you can see here, it's a very special applicator too, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's a foam block with a cloth-like material on that foam block, which you're applying the ceramic coating to.
And do you see any blending, any issues? Like you said, you're doing 1 by 1 sections, and it never have any kind of problems with seeing the way that it was done afterwards?
No, there's no seam if you're doing correctly. I mean, there's a possibility that you could miss a part in the aircraft, but you can always go over it after. There's also a possibility that you're doing the whole aircraft and you didn't buff out with the microfiber one of the sections you did with the ceramic correctly. So what happens is, when the job is all set and done, you want to go around the whole aircraft with light. And, human mistakes can happen where you may miss a small section the size of a quarter. When you walk around the plane and you see, you make sure you go over the whole job, and we usually have 2 people walk around the whole aircraft. If you do see a section like that, the only way to correct it is you could take a little solo compound and you could buff it down a little bit and reapply the sapphire, and it would look perfectly, like it'll be smooth and perfect. So it can happen. We are human. Your eye can miss it when you're applying it, but it's correctable if you know what you're doing.
Okay. And someone asked about duration. So this was a little over 2-day process on the aircraft the size of the Bonanza, not the ceramic coating alone, but the entire thing with a team working on it. So I think you had probably, but what about 4 guys there?
Yeah, there's 4 people there for 2 days, correct.
Yeah, so it was a lot of work going in, and you can certainly see the light here and the attention to detail that was going on. We've talked about the exterior. We're gonna come back as well to that. One other quick question before we switch over to there. Anything special about ailerons, flaps, elevator indentations, anything else on the outside before we move in?
No, same products.
Okay. So let's talk about the inside.
Sure. So the inside, depending on what we are cleaning, that will determine what products we're using. So, for example, at this picture, so I was looking at that picture, I would say is the woodwork, I would use a product called SocialFlight. It's a great cleaning product, and it's a great product to shine up the wood areas. The leather seats, we spoke about Perone. The non-leather parts, I would use a product called Advantage, which is by Real Clean Aviation also. It's a great cleaner for the sidewalls. For carpets, we do use a product called Zep, and I believe it's called Zep Advantage. It's a great product for cleaning carpets, especially when you want to do a dry wash in your carpets.
That's Zep, Z-E-P?
Correct.
Okay. And for everyone who's following along here on all these products, you can email Mark. We'll go back to the products page, but not all these products are there. It's kind of hard to get a really comprehensive list of what Mark uses, but feel free. We'll put contact information up afterwards to try to catch up on some of those products.
And we have like different machines that we use for example for carpets, where we try to do as much dry wash as possible inside the aircraft. You don't want to put really water in there and clean the carpets with too much water. So there's for example, when we do a dry wash in the carpets, we've taken airplanes that had stains in there for years, probably 15, 20 years, whether it's a water stain from a leak or a stain on the seats, on cloth seats. And if you use the right products, even dry products, a lot of times you can get it out. So, for example, we do use a special type of vacuum system. Right now, the name is I can't think of the name right now, but it has basically it's a reverse. The bristles are going reverse directions, and basically it's removing the soil from the surface, where a lot of that soil's on the surface, and it takes away the stains, which are usually at the surface. And anyone has a question on the name of the machine, I'll let you know. If you can drop me an email, I just can't think of it right now. Oh, it's called Aridex, A-R-I-D-E-X. It's a great machine. You probably don't want to buy one just to clean your airplane because it's quite expensive. But with like I said earlier, the right tools, could do a lot. With the
Excellent.
windows, with the windows, depending on the aircraft, certain aircraft you have to be careful. Like, the Piper Meridians have a special windshield where they recommend you to use just some soap and water. But if it's not those Piper Meridians and it's regular windshields, you can use Prest. Priss is a great product to clean the windshields. There's another product out there, which is the tip of my tongue right now that we use. I think it's called 201 or 211. They'll come back to me. I'll let you guys know. I think it's 211, but it's a great product for windshields. And then if you have scratches in your windshields, that I wouldn't attempt right away. I would definitely get a windshield to play with first. But there's a company out there called Micromesh, and they sell, different types of cleaners and also different types of like a sandpaper material to really sand down your windows and get out and to take out the scratches and the micro scratches. But I definitely would recommend do not try that on your aircraft. If you're trying to get out scratches, try it on something else. Get an old window or practice on something because it can do more damage than good.
Yeah, and that is a micromesh is a very extensive process of slowly moving up to more coarser grades, and then you have to go all the way back down. So it's definitely a detailed process, and the same is true actually for your oxidation removal of going only as deep as you can need to, and then you have to back all the way back up as well. Mark, you mentioned now when it comes to leather, you did the cleaning with the horsehair and the Perone, but you also condition the leather. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. So Perone has a cleaner and a conditioner. They have two separate products, and they also have for seats that aren't that bad or seats that are being maintained often. It is a combination product, conditioner and cleaner and conditioner as well. But their product I find to be far superior than anything else out there.
And next is Brightwork. Upper right,
yep.
That's where our spinner started. And the big left picture is pretty much where it left off. Again, protective tape there. And
So we put protective tape there to protect the propellers. Depending on what there's different products that we do have. It really depends on the level of oxidation. There's a product out there called Purple Polish, which is by California Customs, which works really well. There's also a product out there, a three-step product out there called Brightwork Polish. They have a red, white, and blue. Different containers. A red one is more aggressive. That goes down to the white and the blue. And there's also another company out there called Nuvite, which has a great finishing polish called New Shine Grade S. So all those products work really well. You need to make sure that you're using the right buffing pad and buffer on the spinner. Otherwise, you can create swirls, which do not look good on the spinner. So you want to, on this spinner here, I believe we use Purple Polish, which basically did a beautiful job on it. We did 2 rounds of Purple. Purple is a great polish, and it's a great finishing polish. And after you polish the spinner with the Purple, and using the random orbital, this one we used a white foam pad. After that process, we used Dry Wash Pro from Real Clean Aviation, and we cleaned off the spinner, because after you compound the spinner, you're left with a lot of black soot on there, which once you remove that, then you see this finished product on the bottom left-hand side of the page.
And I've personally used it's California Products is the company that makes that Purple, and I've had a lot of luck with that on anything that's kind of that's polished. I've especially they also make a green oxidizing liquid that
it's called
essentially
aluminum deoxidizer.
Sorry. Yeah, that you put on there and basically cause it to to take a little level of oxidation off, and then it's I think it's a type of acid, and converts it, and then after that you put on the purple, and it is extraordinarily effective.
Yeah, it's a great product. And to go back to earlier topic, which I just thought about right now, is when we talk about microfibers. Just one thing about microfibers and terry cloth. If you're working on grease on the belly or grease on the gear, you want to use a terry cloth, which will help you get the grease off easier. When you're dry washing and doing your final steps, you want to use a microfiber, which is very soft, and it won't leave any marks anywhere, and you're not really trying to get off heavy, contaminants. So it's always good to have terry cloths and microfibers. And like I said earlier, use your new microfibers for your windshields, and then afterwards you can always wash them and use them other places of the aircraft, but always use new ones on your windshields. That's my recommendation.
So this was some pictures of our finished product. We're gonna have a few slides on other do's and don'ts and things like that after this, but I wanted to show everybody what we wound up with, and it really is quite striking. You can see the dark green almost looks like black, and the depth of the look is really quite impressive. And the picture in the lower left, especially, that there were so many reflections everywhere you looked. I don't think it looked this new when it got painted. So really, really impressed with your work on this, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
So let's talk about do's and don'ts.
So do's, protect the aircraft. After you go flying, remove those bugs, because if you don't remove those bugs, they will get into your paint. Take your time. Use the right products. I mentioned a bunch of companies that I use for their products. And if you forget, you can always email me or look at the slide again. But use the right products. Be careful with buffers. Buffers, they're great to use, but they can cause harm. If you want to buff your plane, practice on something beforehand. That's not your plane.
Yeah, and keep in mind, of course, that the rivets are raised there, so the last thing you want to do is buff the paint off your rivets as you're trying to get down to the other sections. So you really do have to go around them and pay a lot of attention to that.
Right. Because it's really real easy to buff the paint off the rivets. Very easy, and it'll happen really quick, and there's no turning back after that. So take your time, and if you can use a power buffer or random orbital, practice on something else first.
Now, Mark, someone asked, when we talk about protecting the aircraft, obviously there's some masking that goes on there. You masked major paint lines, but you didn't mask like the end number or the smaller stripes. I think it was basically when you had a big section of green that was bordering a big section of white, that was really where you put that tape down. Yeah,
we put the tape on there. We put the tape on any of the clear light covers for the position lights that you don't want to buff over. Any on the walkway leading up to the door, we taped off that area, so you don't want to get compound in there, because it's really hard to get out once you get in there. It's like kind of grainy, that walking surface. Static ports always want to cover. Pitot tube always want to cover. If your airplane is a satellite, you want to cover that area, because you can't wax the satellite area and you can't ceramic coat the satellite area. Some airplanes have it, some don't. So you want to be careful with that as well. And then, be sure that check the rules of the airport. On some airports, you can wet wash. Like I said, if they have an oil water separator. Most airports you can't do a wet wash, and it's all due to EPA rules. But with a good dry wash, you can get the same the same effect, as doing a wet wash as well. Definitely also don't use household cleaners on your plane. Don't use a pressure washer on your plane. It will remove your paint on that. That's the last thing you want to do.
Yeah, so let's go to those do nots.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Don't use power washers, household products. It could be, people want to use Windex or diluting Clorox. You don't want to use those products. Automotive orbital buffers, be careful with. Don't get too aggressive with compounds. Start off light, you can work your way up, then work your way back down. And yeah, you don't want to work on a large area at a time. You want to work on sections at a time. Treat the sections. And now the thing is, if you have oxidation on half your wing and you start buffing the half that wing, do not think that that's the only area you're going to buff, because once you buff that part of the wing and you compare it to the other side of the wing, which you thought was good, it's not going to look the same. So when you're buffing, you're going to end up buffing the whole wing, but you buff it sections at a time. Do not work in bright sunlight. Best bet is to work, if you can, in a hangar. You don't want to apply wax or ceramic coating right in the sun. If you work in a hangar with some good lights in there, that's the best way to do it. And don't allow water to sit in your aircraft, because you'll see streaks on there, and it will, over time, it will require buffing to get out. They do sell some special water filtration systems you could buy that deionize the water, that you could wash with, and it won't leave any kind of watermarks in the aircraft. That's a good choice to do also, if you're able to get one of those. They're not that bad. They're around $250 approximately, and it just takes all the contaminants and the hardest of the water. One thing I've seen also in the winter is people using brooms to brush off the snow off their aircraft. Don't do that, because you're just going to scratch your paint. I've seen it too many times. People want to fly, they want to get the snow off, a little bit of ice on there, and they're scrubbing with that broom. Definitely do not do that.
Yeah, I've seen that so many times. I'll tell you, for those of you in the northern climates, there is a lot of damage that you can do to your airplane trying to get ice and snow off. Most of it is done by the tools that people use to try to do it, including even the concepts of using credit cards and things like that. And other times it can be the ice and snow itself, depending on what the situation is. So really, really have to be careful, and the best thing possible is to somehow get it into a warm environment, if at all possible, just enough to heat the metal so that you can get the hard stuff off without damaging. So quick break here. We two things, because we're approaching the end of our hour, but we are going to answer additional questions. We'll have Mark give his opinion on things. But I first want to give everyone who's joined us for this hour this great prize, this great gift that Mark has generously donated. Usually people pay for this book. It's a an actual book. It's not a digital download. And so if you email Mark at neadetailing.com, he will actually mail you a copy of this for joining this evening. So again, thank you so much for doing that, Mark. So before we get into the rest of the questions, but really appreciate that you've taken the time this evening, and also that you've given us this generous gift. And again, I think one of the things I discovered through this process as a consumer of it is it is great to know all of the chemicals, all of the tools, all of the right products, and very generous of you to give up all those trade secrets of everything that's used. At the same time, I would encourage other people to consider giving yourself the gift of having someone get you to a baseline, as this did. It was an immense amount of work that I saw take place, and now I feel like I have this really remarkable starting point to try to keep it there. And I think that's one of the most important things that you can do. So thank you, Mark, for that before we move into questions.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So let's hit some questions before we take off. Now, one last note for everyone: there will be a recording available of tonight's presentation. We will that you should get an email with a link to that, but it'll take a day or so for us to process that recording and edit it. It's sometimes 1 to 2 days. However, check out our YouTube channel for SocialFlight. All you have to do is search on SocialFlight on YouTube. The link actually is YouTube/C/SocialFlight. But again, you just do a search on SocialFlight, you can find our YouTube channel, and this recording will be there. So if you want the easiest way to always find it, play the video, pause it for the products, zoom to the section that talks about the thing that you're interested in and hear Mark's comments. You can always do that, and it'll go up on YouTube right after it gets edited tomorrow before we do everything else. So, few questions. The first person has come in and asked, seems like they've got some paint damage where the clear coat's coming off the top and kind of starting to flake. Any thoughts on? I know you don't really do kind of serious paint restoration, but tell us what you think.
It's without seeing, it's hard to tell. If the clear coat's coming off, it depends how bad it is. There are times where if it's not that bad of an area, you could buff it down a little bit and apply a ceramic coating over it just to protect it from getting any worse than it is. There are times that we've had planes, for example, where people didn't want to get a full paint job done, but the plane was in a situation where the paint, you can look at and see like the white paint, but you can see the metal behind it. I'm not sure if you've seen that before. At that point, you can put ceramic coating on it to protect it from getting any worse, and it will put a nice shine on it as well. But every situation is a little different. There's also times that for example, last year there was an aircraft race, I think, in Texas up to Maine, and this nice woman called me up and she's like, "Hey, can you do something for me? I need something to be done to my plane. I have paint peeling off," and we applied a polymer on our aircraft only on the color parts of the airplane, and it made it pop where it took your eyes off of the bad areas. So it really depends on the aircraft.
Okay. And what's the difference between an automotive buffer and an aircraft buffer?
Some of the automotive buffers don't have speed control. The ones we use, they can be used for automotive as well, but some of the ones you pick up, like an AutoZone or something like that, they don't have settings on them. So you want a buffer that does have settings so you can control the RPMs on the buffer.
Okay. How about on a polished aircraft? Can that be ceramic coated?
What do you mean by a polished aircraft?
So polished aluminum.
Oh, yes, you can put a coating on. I wouldn't say, we've used ceramic coating on polish, but I would probably use a granitized product. We do use it's a granitized product that we use on polished aircrafts. If you email me, I'll give you the name of it exactly. But I think it's a granitized, and it's I can't say the name of this moment. But if you email me that question, I'll definitely get you an answer.
Okay.
It's a product that we use a lot on Brightwork.
Now, you talked about what you use for ceramic coating. What are the products that you use for both? There's two other options, of course, right? Waxing, which lasts for a much shorter period of time, like maybe 3 to 6 months, and then using a polymer product. What do you recommend for each of those if someone wants to choose those options?
Sure. So for wax, we use a lot of Rejects. It's a great product. And for the polymer, we use a product called Flight Shield. Same company that makes the Sapphire V1, and it's a great product.
So I thought the Rejects was a polymer, no?
It's a wax polymer. It's not a real polymer. It's a wax polymer. It's not.
Okay.
I wouldn't consider it as a real polymer. It's considered a polymer, but not like a polymer that I'm talking about, like a Flight Shield
Okay,
polymer.
but you don't ever use like a carnauba wax or any of those types of things, or silicone wax?
No.
Okay. There's someone, I'm not sure whether you're familiar with this level, but they're using a 3-inch dual action cyclo buffer with Nuvite to polish the aluminum when they're doing bare aluminum there, and wanted to know if there's any concerns using this smaller buffer with foam pads.
Yeah, that's a great finishing tool. We do use that sometimes as a last step. That's a great polisher. Another trick you can use also is they do sell. You could use a cotton flannel to put on that polisher that you just mentioned. That works really well to polish up the spinner at the end. And also you can use flour. Flour is a great product to use after you polish the spinner. You put some flour on there, wipe it off with a microfiber, and that's another little trick also that you could do.
Flour, as in cooking, like baking?
Correct.
Really? That's fascinating.
Yep. Yep.
So we have a few people asking questions that have to do with TKS anti-ice systems. Any suggestions that when you're dealing with those, really the painted stuff, the question is there a better coating to be used, when you know that TKS anti-ice fluid's going to be on it? Any suggestions on how to remove the residue of it, things like that?
My suggestion is you're not going to put any protective anything on the TKS system at all. You want to cover that up when you're doing any kind of detailing work. You can use
I
a
think
dry wash.
they're talking about the paint behind it, right? It flows back on the wings, and the question is, what's the preferred coating for the paint when you know you're going to be having de-ice fluid all over the paint?
I would say is ceramic coat the plane to protect it, and then when you land and you wash it off, it'll come off easily.
Okay.
And your aircraft will still be shiny after that. Also, it'll still look great.
Yeah. Now, someone else, just for clarification, the ceramic coating doesn't. Someone had asked a question having to do with fretting. We're talking about removing the staining that's caused by fretting, but obviously fretting is caused by a loose rivet, a rivet that wasn't properly bucked or that started to get corrosion between the rivet and the skin of the aircraft, forming a gap and allowing the rivet to loosen. And that, nothing about detailing is going to solve that problem. All we can do is get rid of the staining that's occurred before, and then of course it's going to occur again until that rivet gets removed and replaced. Just a quick tip on that from one of the questions that came in. What about props? What do you do when it comes to props, Mark?
On the props, we do a dry wash to the props. We remove the
Any
bugs.
coatings or anything like that?
No.
Okay. And how about bugs? What are your tricks to getting bugs off, other than, as you told me, ceramic coat the aircraft, which is the theme, and then they wipe off easily. But if you don't have that, what do you recommend for getting bugs off?
We use debugger. The best debugger that I use is from Real Clean Aviation and a bug sponge. And my recommendation is get those bugs off after each time you fly.
Yeah, I can say that is one of the biggest reasons that I had you come in, and our aircraft had a lot of bug residue, bug staining, and that on the leading edges.
Right, and the bug sponge that we use to take the bugs off is made by a company called Aero Cosmetics.
Okay.
So if you looked it up, I do believe you can get directly through them, or even probably on Amazon.
Excellent. So I'd like to thank everyone again. Mark, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
My
We
pleasure.
really appreciate you sharing your expertise. I cannot say enough about the job that your team did, and it really, really is impressive. And again, that's coming from someone who's been an aircraft owner for 20 years and has never paid a professional to other than painting to to do it. And I am really impressed by the level of work that got done and the finished product that came out of it. So again, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone for joining us this evening. The SocialFlight's webinar series will continue with focuses on many other products, including avionics and maintenance and all sorts of other topics that will hopefully be just as fascinating as tonight's with Mark and New England Aircraft Detailing. So again, thank you very much for doing that. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel. We will send out a recording once we're done processing this. And of course, you can reach out to Mark with questions about all these products that he has talked about and steps and processes and questions. It really has been a treat to get that expertise shared. And so again, thank you all very much. Please spread the word about SocialFlight. Tell your friends. Free app, and it helps everyone continue wonderful webinars like this evening. So have a wonderful night, and blue skies to everybody.